I found out the truth on a day that was supposed to be ordinary, and by the time I understood it, it was already 25 years too late. I found out my son wasn't mine 25 years after I gave birth to him. And the worst part, someone in my own house knew the truth the entire time. It started with a photograph I was never supposed to find, hidden deep inside my late husband's study, buried between documents that had nothing to do with it. I was cleaning the study that afternoon, a room no one had touched since my husband passed. Dust had settled into the corners, and the air carried that quiet stillness of a life paused in time. I wasn't looking for anything, just organizing, remembering, letting go. That's when I found it, tucked inside a folder that didn't belong there, not with the business papers, not with the estate files, but hidden, almost deliberately. My hands paused. Something about it felt wrong before I even opened it. And when I did, my heart stopped. It was a hospital photograph. 2 newborn babies, side by side, identical blankets, identical bassinets, but only one thing was different: the tags. I frowned, adjusting my glasses, because I had seen that photo before, years ago, the day my son was born, but something about it now felt off. The names, they didn't match what I remembered. I stared at it longer, my chest tightening slowly, because memories don't just disappear, they stay, quiet, waiting. And in that moment, something deep inside me whispered a question I wasn't ready to hear. What if the baby I brought home wasn't mine? I laughed softly to myself, shook my head. That's ridiculous, I whispered, but my hands were trembling because the feeling wouldn't go away. That quiet, uncomfortable pull. I sat down slowly in my husband's old chair, the photograph still in my hands, and for the first time in years, I thought back to that night. The hospital, the silence, the moment they placed my baby in my arms, and suddenly, a memory I had buried for decades came rushing back. A nurse, standing in the doorway, looking nervous, almost afraid. My breath caught, because I had ignored it back then. I trusted everything, everyone. Why wouldn't I? We were the Whitmores. Nothing like that could ever happen to us. But now, sitting there with that photograph in my hands, I realized something that made my heart sink. I had never questioned it, not once. And that was my first mistake, because the truth had been there from the very beginning, and someone else had seen it too. I kept staring at the photograph. 2 babies, 2 names, 1 mistake. Or at least, that's what I wanted to believe. I placed the photo on the desk in front of me, smoothing its edges with my fingers, as if that could somehow make it clearer, make it make sense. It's just old, I whispered. Things get mixed up. But my voice didn't sound convincing, not even to me, because something inside me had already begun to shift. That quiet certainty I had carried for 25 years was starting to crack. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. And just like that, I was back in the hospital. The room had been dimly lit, soft voices, footsteps in the hallway, the kind of calm that feels almost unreal after hours of pain and waiting. I remember holding my baby for the first time, so small, So perfect. I didn't question anything. Why would I? Everything felt right. But then, that moment, the one I had forgotten, or maybe chosen to forget, there had been a nurse, standing near the door, watching, not smiling like the others, not congratulating me, just watching. I remember thinking it was strange. I even asked her once, "Is everything all right?" She had hesitated, just for a second, then nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." But her eyes said something else, something unsettled. I opened my eyes slowly. The memory faded, but the feeling stayed. Heavy, uncomfortable, real. Why would she look like that? Why would she hesitate? I reached for the photograph again. This time, I looked closer, at the tags, at the tiny details I had ignored just moments ago. One tag had a small mark near the edge, a faint smudge, almost like it had been handled too many times, or changed. My breath caught, because suddenly this didn't feel like confusion anymore. It felt like something else, something deliberate. A thought formed in my mind, slow, unwelcome, impossible. "What if?" I whispered, but I couldn't finish the sentence, because finishing it would mean accepting something I wasn't ready to face. I stood up quickly. The room felt smaller now, the walls closer, as if the house itself was listening, holding onto something I had never noticed before. I walked toward the window, looked out at the garden, the same garden where my son had played as a child, where I had watched him grow, where I had believed every moment belonged to me. My son, the one I raised, the one I loved. My chest tightened, because a question had now taken root in my mind, and it refused to go away. What if he wasn't mine? I turned back toward the desk, the photograph still lying there, waiting, silent, patient, because some truths don't rush. They wait until you're finally ready to see them. And deep down, I had a feeling this was only the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. The photograph stayed on my bedside table, turned face down, as if hiding it would somehow quiet the thoughts in my mind. But it didn't, because once a question like that enters your life, it doesn't leave. By morning, I had made a decision. If there was even the smallest chance that something was wrong, I needed answers. There was only one place to start: the hospital. The building hadn't changed much in 25 years. Same pale walls, same quiet hallways, same feeling that something important had once happened there and never truly left. I walked slowly toward the reception desk, my hands clasped tightly in front of me. "Good morning," the young woman behind the counter said politely. "How can I help you?" "I need information," I said. "My son was born here 25 years ago." She typed something into her computer. "What's the name?" I hesitated. For the first time, that question felt heavier than it should have. "Daniel Whitmore," she nodded. "I'll check the records." While she searched, I looked around. The waiting area, the chairs, the doors leading to rooms I had once walked through without a second thought. Everything felt familiar, and yet completely different. "Ma'am," I turned back. "There's limited access to records that old," she said, "but I can request archived files. It may take some time." "That's fine," I replied. I'll wait. As I sat down, something else came back to me, a memory I hadn't thought about in years. After Daniel was born, there was a man in the hallway, standing quietly, watching. At the time, I assumed he was just another visitor, another father, another family member waiting for good news. But now, that memory felt different, because he hadn't looked happy. He hadn't looked relieved. He had looked tense, like someone holding his breath. I leaned forward slightly in my chair, trying to remember more. And then I did. He worked for us. My chest tightened, because suddenly his face became clear in my mind. Older now, but unmistakable. Mr. Hale, our estate manager. He had been with our family for years. Loyal, quiet, always present. The kind of man you trust without thinking. And yet, he had been there that night, at the hospital, standing in the hallway, watching. Why? Ma'am, the receptionist's voice pulled me back. Yes, we've sent the request. It may take a few hours. That's all right, I said. I'll come back. I walked out of the hospital slowly, but this time I wasn't going home, because there was someone else I needed to see. Someone who had been there that night. Someone who had never truly left our lives. Mr. Hale. And as I got into my car, a thought settled deep in my chest. Cold, heavy, unavoidable. If something had happened that night, he knew about it. I hadn't been to Mr. Hale's house in years, not since my husband passed. He had retired shortly after that, quietly, the same way he had lived his life in our home, always present, never noticed too much. His house sat at the edge of town, small, neat, carefully kept. Nothing like the estate he had managed for us for so many years. I parked outside and sat there for a moment, my hands resting on the steering wheel, because suddenly this felt real, too real. What if I was wrong? What if this was all just a mistake, a memory playing tricks on me? But then the photograph came back into my mind. The nurse, the tags, the feeling. I stepped out of the car, walked up the short path, and knocked. It took a few seconds. Then the door opened. Mr. Hale stood there, older now, his hair thinner, his shoulders slightly bent. But his eyes, they were exactly the same, sharp, observant. And the moment he saw me, something changed. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, surprised. I wasn't expecting you. I know, I replied softly. May I come in? He hesitated, just for a second, then stepped aside. Of course, the house was quiet, simple, everything in its place, almost too perfect. I hope everything is all right, he said as we walked into the living room. That depends, I replied. He looked at me, carefully now. I reached into my bag, pulled out the photograph, and placed it on the table between us. I found this yesterday, I said. He didn't touch it, didn't move, but his eyes dropped to it. And in that moment, I saw it. Recognition. His face didn't change much, but his stillness did. Too still. Do you remember this? I asked. He took a slow breath. It's an old photo, he said. Yes. From the hospital. Yes. Silence filled the room. I stepped closer. Why were you there that night? His eyes lifted to mine, and for the first time since I had known him, he didn't answer immediately. I worked for your family, he said finally. It was an important moment. That's not what I asked. The room felt tighter now, the air heavier. Why were you in the nursery hallway? I repeated. He looked away, toward the window, as if searching for something that wasn't there. I don't remember everything from that night, he said quietly, but I did, or at least I remembered enough. You were watching, I said. His jaw tightened slightly. And so was someone else, I added. That got his attention. His eyes snapped back to mine. The nurse, I said. She saw something. For a brief moment, his calm expression broke, and that was all I needed. Because in that single second, Mr. Hale told me the truth without saying a word. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Mr. Hale stood near the window, his back slightly turned, as if the light outside could somehow shield him from what was happening inside that room. But silence can be louder than words, and his silence was telling me everything. You remember, I said quietly. He didn't respond, didn't deny it either. I stepped closer. You were there that night, I continued. In the hallway, watching, he exhaled slowly. It was a long time ago, Mrs. Whitmore. Yes, I said, but not long enough to forget something like that. He turned toward me again. His face was calm, but his eyes weren't. There was something behind them now, something unsettled. You're looking for answers, he said. I am. And what do you think you'll find? The truth. He gave a faint, tired smile. Sometimes the truth doesn't help. Sometimes it's the only thing that does. I picked up the photograph from the table and held it up slightly. The tags, I said. They're not right. His gaze flickered, just for a second, but I caught it. There were two babies, I continued. Mine and another. He didn't speak. And a nurse who looked like she had seen something she wasn't supposed to. That made him tense. His fingers tightened slightly at his side. What was her name? I asked. This time he reacted. A small movement, barely noticeable, but enough. I don't remember, he said quickly. I stepped closer. You do. He shook his head. No. But now his voice had changed. Less steady, less certain. Names don't disappear, I said softly. Not when something important happens. The room felt very still. The kind of stillness that comes just before something breaks. I held his gaze, and then I said the one thing I wasn't even sure was true, but needed to be. She's still alive, isn't she? Mr. Hale's eyes widened, just slightly, but enough. And in that moment, I knew I was no longer chasing a possibility. I was getting closer to the truth, because whatever happened that night wasn't buried. It was waiting, and someone else still remembered it too. Mr. Hale didn't answer me, not right away, but he didn't deny it either. And sometimes silence is the loudest answer of all. She's alive, I said quietly. This time, it wasn't a question. Mr. Hale closed his eyes for a moment, as if the weight of that single truth was heavier than anything he had carried in years. You should go home, Mrs. Whitmore, he said softly. That would be best. Best for who? I asked. He didn't respond. I stepped closer, my voice steady now. I'm not leaving until you tell me what happened that night. He looked at me, really looked at me. And for the first time since I had known him, he didn't look like the man who had served our family so faithfully for decades. He looked like someone who had been hiding something for far too long. "I didn't mean for things to go this far," he said quietly. My chest tightened. "Then tell me." He hesitated, then walked slowly to the chair and sat down, his hands resting on his knees. "I knew her," he said. "The nurse." The room felt smaller. "What was her name?" I asked. He swallowed. "Evelyn." The name settled into the air between us. "Real, finally real. Where is she?" I asked. He shook his head. "I don't know. You're lying." His eyes lifted to mine. "I haven't seen her in years." "That's not what I asked," I said. "I asked where she is." He exhaled slowly, as if deciding how much of the truth he could allow himself to say. "She left the hospital not long after that night," he said. "Transferred, then disappeared." "Why?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "Because she saw something," I said. He looked down, and that was all the confirmation I needed. "What did she see?" I whispered. The silence stretched, long, heavy, unavoidable. Then finally he spoke. "She saw me in the nursery." My heart began to pound. "And?" I asked. He closed his eyes again, just for a moment, and she saw what I did. The words hit me like a sudden drop beneath my feet. My voice came out barely above a whisper. "What did you do?" The room felt like it had stopped breathing. Mr. Hale sat in front of me, his hands trembling slightly now, his eyes no longer able to meet mine. I stood there, waiting, because once a truth begins to surface, it doesn't stop halfway. "What did you do?" I asked again. This time my voice was steady, firm. There was no turning back now. Mr. Hale swallowed hard. His shoulders dropped slightly, as if something inside him had finally given up the fight. "I switched them," he said quietly. The words didn't feel real. Not at first. They just existed in the air, meaningless, impossible. "I'm sorry," he added. But now they began to sink in, slowly, painfully. "You what?" I whispered. He looked up at me, and this time he didn't look away. "I switched the babies," he repeated. My chest tightened. The room blurred slightly around the edges. "No," I said. That was all I could say, because some truths are too large to understand all at once. "That's not possible." But even as I said it, I knew it was. The photograph, the nurse, the hesitation, the memory, everything suddenly aligned. "You're lying," I said again, but my voice had changed, less certain. "I wish I was," he replied. The silence that followed was unbearable. "Why?" I asked finally. Mr. Hale looked down at his hands, at the life he had lived, at the choice he had made. "I had a son," he said. The words hit me differently now. "He was born that same night." My breath caught, and I knew, he continued slowly, what his life would be. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name. "Small," he said, "limited." Then his voice dropped. "Nothing like yours." I stepped back slightly. "And so you decided," I began, but I couldn't finish, because the answer was already there. "I gave my son your life," he said. "The room felt like it was closing in, and took yours away." I couldn't speak, not right away. The words were there, somewhere, but they refused to come out. Because once you hear something like that, it changes everything you thought you knew. You're saying, I finally managed, my voice barely steady, that the child I raised, I couldn't finish. Mr. Hale did it for me, was mine. The room spun slightly. No, I whispered, but even as I said it, I could feel the truth settling in, heavy, unavoidable. And my son, I continued slowly, the one I gave birth to. Mr. Hale closed his eyes. Grew up in your house. I gripped the back of the chair beside me. My legs felt weak. 25 years. 25 years of birthdays, of school days, of laughter, of love. And now, I didn't know which child belonged to me. What were their names? I asked suddenly. Mr. Hale hesitated. Tell me, I said. He looked at me carefully, as if measuring whether I was ready for the answer. My son, he said quietly. The one you raised. He paused, then finished. Is Daniel. The name hit me like a wave. Daniel, my son, the one I had held, protected, loved every single day of his life. I shook my head slowly. No, but there was more. I could see it in his face. And yours? I asked. Mr. Hale's voice dropped. Adrian. The name felt unfamiliar, strange, but something about it stayed with me. Where is he? I asked. Mr. Hale didn't answer immediately. Where is my son? I repeated. This time, his silence felt different, because now it wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about the present. And wherever Adrian was, he had no idea who he really was. Where is he? My voice sounded unfamiliar to me, stronger than I felt. But there are moments when something inside you takes over, because it has to. Mr. Hale didn't answer immediately. He looked down at his hands again, as if the truth had become too heavy to hold. Mr. Hale, I said firmly, where is my son? He exhaled slowly. He's here. The words didn't make sense. Here, I repeated. He nodded. In this town. My heart began to pound. You've seen him, he added quietly. The room seemed to tilt. No, I said. That's not possible. But he didn't correct me. You've seen him, he repeated. A strange feeling crept through me, something between fear and recognition. Who is he? I asked. Mr. Hale hesitated. Then finally, he said a name. Adrian Cole. The name echoed in my mind. Cole. It sounded familiar. Too familiar. I searched my memory, faces, voices, moments, and then it came back. The young man at the cafe, just 2 weeks ago. He had helped me when I dropped my bag, picked everything up, smiled politely. Are you all right, ma'am? He had asked. His voice had been warm, gentle. I remembered looking at him for a moment longer than I should have, because something about him felt familiar. Not his face, not his voice, but something deeper. I had brushed it off at the time. A coincidence. Nothing more. But now, standing in that room, hearing that name, my chest tightened. That's him, I whispered. Mr. Hale looked up. You know him. I've seen him, I said slowly. And suddenly, a realization settled deep inside me. For 25 years, I had lived my life believing I knew my son, and all this time, the one who truly was mine had been just a stranger passing by. I left Mr. Hale's house without saying another word. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because there was too much. Adrian Cole. The name repeated in my mind the entire drive home, over and over, as if saying it enough times would somehow make it real. A stranger. A young man I had seen once, maybe twice, and now I was supposed to believe he was my son. No, I whispered to myself, it can't be that simple. But deep down, it wasn't simple at all, because suddenly, every memory I had of that moment at the cafe came back with a different weight. The way he had looked at me, not just polite, not just kind, but familiar, as if something unspoken had passed between us, something I hadn't understood at the time. I parked the car outside my house and sat there for a moment, trying to breathe, trying to think. Inside that house, everything was still the same walls, the same photographs, the same life I had built, but now none of it felt certain anymore. I stepped inside slowly. The silence greeted me again, comforting, but different now. My eyes moved instinctively toward the hallway, toward the photographs. Daniel, at 5 years old, smiling, holding my hand. Daniel, at 10, running through the garden. Daniel, at 20, standing proudly beside his father. My chest tightened, because no matter what the truth was, those moments were real. The love was real. I walked closer to the wall and touched one of the frames gently. "You're still my son," I whispered, and I meant it, because blood doesn't erase love, but it doesn't erase truth either. I stepped back, and for the first time since this began, I made a decision. I needed to see him again. Adrian, not as a stranger this time, not as a coincidence, but as someone who might carry a part of me I had never known. I reached for my phone, my hands still slightly unsteady. The cafe. I remembered where it was, and suddenly a strange feeling filled my chest. Not fear, not confusion, but something else. Hope, because somewhere in this town there was a young man living his life, not knowing that everything he believed about himself was about to change. And this time, I wasn't going to walk past him like a stranger. I didn't wait. Some decisions don't need time. They need courage. The cafe was just as I remembered. Warm lights, soft conversations, the quiet clinking of cups against saucers. A place where life moves gently, unaware of the storms outside. I stepped inside slowly, my eyes scanning the room, every face, every corner. For a moment, I thought I was too late, and then I saw him, near the window, sitting alone, a book open in front of him. Adrian, my heart stopped. He looked the same, calm, thoughtful, unaware. But now I saw something I hadn't noticed before. The way he held his cup, the slight tilt of his head when he read. It reminded me of someone, my husband. My breath caught, because some things you don't need proof for. You just feel them. I stood there for a moment longer than I should have, watching, trying to understand something that words couldn't explain. Then he looked up, our eyes met, and just like before, there was that moment. Recognition, not of who we were, but of something deeper. He smiled politely, the same gentle smile. "Hello," he said. My voice felt distant, but I managed to respond. "Hello." I walked toward him slowly, each step heavier than the last. "May I sit?" I asked. "Of course," he said, moving his book aside. I sat across from him, closer now, close enough to see the small details, the lines of his face, the quiet kindness in his eyes. "So," he said, "we've met before, haven't we?" I nodded. "Yes." "You dropped your bag," he added with a small smile. I smiled faintly. "Yes, I remember." There was a brief silence, comfortable, but filled with something unspoken. "I'm Adrian," he said. The name landed softly this time, not like a shock, but like something that had finally found its place. "I know," I said. He looked at me, slightly surprised. "And you are?" My heart began to beat faster. This was the moment that would change everything. I opened my mouth to answer, but the words didn't come. Because how do you tell someone that you might be their mother? Right, part 12, part 12. The truth I couldn't say. I looked at him, and for a moment, I forgot how to speak. "My name is Margaret," I said finally. "Margaret," he repeated with a polite nod. Such a simple exchange, such an ordinary moment, and yet nothing about it felt ordinary, because I wasn't just sitting across from a kind young man in a cafe. I was sitting across from a life I had lost before I even knew I had it. "What brings you here today?" he asked. The question was simple, but the answer was anything but. "I come here sometimes," I said. "That day when we met, I was just passing by." He smiled. "It's a good place to think. Think, if only he knew." "And you?" I asked. "I come here to read," he said, lifting the book slightly. I glanced at it, then back at him. "You seem like someone who thinks a lot," I said. He laughed softly. "I've been told that." There it was again, that warmth, that calmness. It felt familiar, too familiar. I studied his face carefully, trying to find something, a feature, a resemblance, a piece of proof, but it wasn't in the details. It was in the feeling, and that made it even harder. "Do you live nearby?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "just a few blocks away." "And your family?" I asked carefully. He hesitated, just slightly. "It's just me," he said. My heart tightened. "No parents?" I asked. He shook his head. "I grew up in a foster home," he said quietly. The words hit me harder than anything else. Foster home, 25 years, and my son had grown up without me. I looked down at my hands, trying to steady myself. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. I nodded quickly. "Yes, I'm fine." But I wasn't, because everything inside me was screaming to tell him, to say it, to tell him the truth. But how do you take someone's life and turn it upside down in a single sentence? I looked at him again, at the calm in his eyes, the life he had built, the identity he believed was his. And I realized something that stopped me. This truth wasn't just mine to tell. It would break him too. So instead, I smiled softly. "It was nice seeing you again," I said. He smiled back. "You too." And just like that, the moment passed. I stood up slowly and walked away. But this time, it wasn't because I didn't know the truth. It was because I did, and I wasn't ready for what would happen when I finally said it. Write Part 13, Part 13. The truth that refused to stay hidden. I thought I could wait. I thought I could take time. Think carefully. Decide the right moment. But the truth doesn't wait. It doesn't stay quiet once it's been found. That evening, I sat alone in the living room. The house felt different now. Not empty, but uncertain. The photograph lay on the table in front of me. 2 babies, 2 lives, one choice that had shaped everything. I picked it up again, my fingers tracing the edges. 25 years, and now everything was unraveling. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. Daniel. My chest tightened. For a moment, I considered not answering, but I did. Hello, Mom. His voice came through, calm as always. Are you home? Yes. I'll be there in a few minutes. Before I could respond, he hung up. I stared at the phone. Something in his voice felt different. Too controlled. Too careful. 10 minutes later, the door opened. Daniel walked in, the same way he always had. Confident. Comfortable. At home. Mom, he said, stepping into the room. I didn't respond right away. I was looking at him, really looking. For the first time, not as the son I had raised, but as the child of the man who had taken my life. You went to see him, Daniel said. My heart skipped. What? I asked. Mr. Hale, he said. The room went still. How do you know that? I asked slowly. Daniel smiled faintly. Because I've known for a long time. The words hit me harder than anything else that day. You, what? I whispered. He walked closer, calm, unshaken. I didn't know everything at first, he said, but I knew enough. My chest tightened. Knew what? That something wasn't right, he said. I felt the ground shift beneath me. How long? I asked. He looked at me, and for a moment, there was something in his eyes I had never seen before. Not confusion, not fear, but certainty. Long enough, he said quietly. The silence that followed was suffocating, because now this wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about what had been hidden and who had been hiding it. You were going to tell me? I asked. Daniel didn't answer. And that was my answer, because in that moment, I realized something I hadn't considered before. The truth hadn't just been buried. It had been waiting. And now, it was no longer in my control. The room felt colder, not because of the air, but because of the truth now standing between us. You knew, I said quietly. Daniel didn't deny it. He didn't look away. I had my suspicions, he said. Suspicions? I repeated. He nodded. When I was younger, things didn't add up. My chest tightened. What things? He exhaled slowly. Medical records, he said. Blood types that didn't match. The words hit hard. And then, I asked. I started asking questions, he continued. Did you ask me? I said. He shook his head. No, why not? His answer came without hesitation. Because I didn't want to lose you. The room fell silent. For a moment, everything stopped. Because in all of this, all the lies, all the hidden truths, that was the first thing that felt completely real. You should have told me, I said softly. I know, he replied. Why didn't you? He looked at me. And for the first time, I saw something I recognized again. Fear. Because if it was true, he said quietly, then you weren't mine. My eyes filled. I was always yours, I said, and I meant it. Because love doesn't change with blood. It doesn't disappear with truth. It stays. Daniel looked down. I didn't want to risk that, he said. I nodded slowly. And now? I asked. He took a deep breath. Now, I think you deserve to know everything. The words settled between us. Everything. That meant there was still more. What haven't you told me? I asked. Daniel hesitated. Then he said something that changed everything again. I found him years ago. My heart stopped. Adrian, I whispered. Daniel nodded. I knew who he was. The room felt like it was closing in again. You knew where my son was, and you said nothing? I asked. His voice was quiet now. I wanted to be sure. Sure of what? That he wouldn't take you away from me. The words cut deeper than anything before, because now this wasn't just about the past. It was about a choice. A choice Daniel had made to keep the truth hidden, to keep me. I stepped back slowly. Where is he? I asked. Daniel looked at me, and for the first time, there was no hesitation. He works at the cafe you went to today, he said. My breath caught. You knew I would go there, I said. Daniel nodded. I needed you to see him. The room fell into silence once more, because now everything had come together. The photograph, the nurse, Mr. Hale, Adrian, Daniel, all of it. And it had led to this moment. A moment where the truth was no longer hidden, only waiting to be faced. I looked at Daniel, then toward the door, because somewhere in this town, two lives were about to collide, and nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't wait until morning. Some moments don't belong to tomorrow. They belong to now. The streets were quiet as I drove. The same roads I had traveled for years, but tonight, everything felt different, because I wasn't just going to a cafe. I was going to meet my son. Daniel sat beside me, silent, watching the road ahead. Neither of us spoke, because there were no words left that could make this easier. When we arrived, the cafe lights were still on, warm, inviting, unaware. I stepped out of the car slowly, my heart beating harder with every step toward the door. Inside, it was quieter than before. Only a few people remained. And there he was, Adrian, behind the counter this time, speaking to a customer, smiling politely, living his life, unaware that everything was about to change. I stood there for a moment, watching him. This time, I didn't hesitate. I walked forward. Adrian, I said. He looked up, recognized me instantly. Margaret, he said with a small smile. I didn't expect to see you again so soon. I smiled faintly. Neither did I. Daniel stepped forward beside me. Adrian's expression shifted slightly. There was something in the air now, something different. Is everything all right? Adrian asked. I took a breath. No, I said honestly, but it needs to be. He looked between us, confused, concerned. Can we sit? I asked. He nodded slowly. We moved to a table near the corner, the same place we had sat before. But this time, nothing felt the same. Adrian sat across from us. What's going on? He asked. I looked at Daniel, then back at Adrian. This was the moment. No more waiting. No more silence. My name isn't the only thing I didn't tell you, I said softly. Adrian frowned slightly. What do you mean? My hands trembled slightly, but my voice stayed steady. 25 years ago, I said, something happened at the hospital the night I gave birth. He listened. Quietly. There was another baby born that night, I continued. Adrian's expression didn't change. Not yet, but the two babies, I paused, were switched, silence, complete. Adrian blinked. Once. I don't understand, he said slowly. I looked at him, really looked at him. You were that baby, I said. The words hung in the air. Daniel didn't move, didn't speak. Adrian stared at me, trying to process something his mind wasn't ready to accept. That's not possible, he said. I nodded slightly. I know. He looked at Daniel, then back at me. Are you saying? He stopped, because some sentences are too heavy to finish. Yes, I said gently. His eyes filled with confusion, with disbelief, with something deeper. So, who are you? He asked. My voice softened. I'm your mother. The words stayed in the air long after I said them. I'm your mother. Adrian didn't respond. Not immediately. He just sat there, staring at me, as if trying to find something in my face that could make it all make sense. That's not, he began, then stopped, because there was no simple way to finish that sentence. This can't be true, he said finally. I nodded. I know how it sounds. Daniel remained silent beside me. For the first time since I had known him, he didn't try to control the situation. He didn't try to explain, because some truths can't be managed. Adrian leaned back slightly in his chair, his eyes moving between us. Is this some kind of joke? He asked. No, I said softly. His jaw tightened. So my entire life, he said slowly, everything I believed he couldn't finish, because now he understood. You're saying I was taken, he asked. The word hit hard. Taken, I swallowed. Yes. He let out a quiet breath, then laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because sometimes laughter is the only thing that comes when everything else breaks. I grew up in foster homes, he said. Do you know what that's like? My chest tightened. I'm so sorry, I whispered. He shook his head. No, don't do that. His voice was firm now, not angry, but controlled. Don't apologize like you were there, he said. I looked down, because he was right. I hadn't been there. Not for his first steps, not for his childhood, not for anything that had shaped his life. Daniel finally spoke. We didn't know, he said. Adrian turned toward him. You knew, he said quietly. The words landed sharply. Daniel didn't deny it. I found out later, he said. And you didn't tell me? Adrian asked. Daniel's voice softened. I didn't know how. Adrian laughed again, bitter this time. You didn't know how? He repeated. The silence that followed was heavy, because now this wasn't just about what had been done. It was about what hadn't been said. I leaned forward slightly. I know this doesn't fix anything, I said gently, but you deserve to know. Adrian looked at me again, long, carefully. You're asking me to accept that you're my mother, he said. No, I replied softly. I'm not asking you to accept anything. He frowned slightly. Then why tell me? Because it's the truth, I said. And the truth doesn't ask for permission. It simply exists. Adrian looked down at the table. His hands clenched slightly. My whole life, he said quietly, I wondered where I came from. My heart broke a little more. And now, he continued, I finally get an answer. He looked up, and I don't know what to do with it. Neither did I, because this wasn't just a story. It was 3 lives, 3 different truths, and none of them could go back to what they were before. But sometimes, moving forward doesn't start with understanding. It starts with something much smaller. Adrian took a slow breath, then said something I hadn't expected. Can I ask you something? Yes, I replied. He looked directly at me. Why now? Why now? Adrian's question stayed in the air. Simple, direct, and impossible to avoid. I looked at him, at the man he had become without me, at the years I had missed. Because I didn't know, I said softly. He watched me carefully, not judging, not accepting, just listening. I found out yesterday, I continued. A photograph, hidden away something that didn't make sense. I paused, and once I saw it, I couldn't ignore it. Adrian's eyes didn't leave mine. So you lived your whole life, he said, not knowing I existed. Yes, the word felt heavy, but it was the truth. He nodded slowly. And you? He asked, turning slightly toward Daniel. When did you find out? Daniel hesitated. Years ago, he admitted. Adrian let out a quiet breath. And you said nothing. I was afraid, Daniel said. Of what? Adrian asked. Daniel looked down. Of losing everything, he said quietly. The words hung between them, because now this wasn't just about truth. It was about choice. Adrian leaned back in his chair, processing. So you kept living your life, he said, knowing mine was built on a lie. Daniel didn't answer, because there was no answer that could fix that. I stepped in gently. This isn't your fault, I said to Adrian. He looked at me. And it's not yours either, I added. Then whose fault is it? He asked. I didn't need to think. The man who made the choice, I said, Mr. Hale. The name didn't need to be spoken. Adrian nodded slowly. And where is he now? He asked. At his home, I said. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up. I need to see him, he said. Daniel looked up quickly. Adrian, wait. No, he said firmly. For 25 years, someone decided my life for me. His voice wasn't loud, but it was strong. I think I deserved to hear it from him. The room fell silent, because he was right. And sometimes, the only way forward is to face the past directly. Adrian looked at me. Will you come with me? He asked. I didn't hesitate. Yes, Daniel stood as well. I'm coming too, he said. Adrian nodded, because now this wasn't just about truth. It was about accountability. And somewhere, a man who had changed 3 lives with one decision was about to face the consequences. That night, everything that had been hidden for 25 years was finally going to be confronted. Right Part 18, Part 18. The man who took everything the drive to Mr. Hale's house felt longer than before, not because of the distance, but because of what we were about to face. No one spoke. Not me, not Daniel, not Adrian. 3 lives, 3 truths, all heading toward the same place. When we arrived, the house looked exactly the same, quiet, still, as if nothing inside it had ever changed, but everything had. Adrian stepped out of the car first, without hesitation. I followed. Daniel closes behind. We walked up the path together. This time, there was no uncertainty. Adrian knocked. Firm. A few seconds passed. Then the door opened. Mr. Hale stood there. And the moment his eyes landed on Adrian, everything changed. He froze. Not confusion, not curiosity, recognition. His lips parted slightly. "You," he whispered. Adrian stepped forward. "I think you know who I am," he said. Mr. Hale didn't answer, because he didn't need to. The truth was already written across his face. We stepped inside. The room felt heavier than before, because this time, no one was hiding from the truth. Adrian stood in the center of the room, looking directly at the man who had shaped his entire life. "Say it," Adrian said. Mr. Hale's voice trembled. He stopped, because some words carry too much weight. "Say it," Adrian repeated. Silence. Then, finally, Mr. Hale spoke. "You're my son." The words landed hard. Adrian didn't move, didn't react, because the truth had already settled in him. "I grew up in foster homes," Adrian said. Mr. Hale closed his eyes. "I know," he whispered. "You know," Adrian repeated. His voice was still calm, but something beneath it had changed. "You gave me that life," he said. Mr. Hale didn't deny it. "I thought I was giving you something better," he said. Adrian let out a short breath. "Better," he said. He looked around the small room, then back at him. "This?" he asked. Mr. Hale lowered his head. "I thought you would grow up with everything," he said. Adrian's voice hardened. "Instead, I grew up with nothing." The room fell silent, because there was no defense left, no explanation that could undo what had been done. I stepped forward slowly. "And you gave my son a life that wasn't his," I said. Mr. Hale looked at me. "I gave him your life," he said. "No," I replied. "You took mine." The words settled heavily, because that was the truth. Not complicated, not emotional, just real. Adrian stood there, looking at the man who had made that choice. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Adrian asked the question that mattered most. "Why didn't you ever come back for me?" Mr. Hale's face broke, because this time there was no answer he could hide behind. Part 19. The answer that broke everything Mr. Hale didn't answer. Not immediately. Because some questions don't just need courage, they need truth. "Why didn't you ever come back for me?" Adrian repeated. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried something deeper. Pain. Mr. Hale looked at him. Really looked this time, as if trying to see the child he had once held in the man standing before him now. "I couldn't," he said quietly. Adrian's expression didn't change. "That's not an answer," he said. Mr. Hale swallowed hard. "I told myself it was better this way," he continued. "Better for who?" Adrian asked. Silence. "For you," Mr. Hale said. Adrian shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "You don't get to say that." The words landed sharply. Better would have been knowing who I was, Adrian continued. Better would have been having a choice. Mr. Hale's shoulders dropped. I was afraid, he admitted. Adrian let out a breath. Of what? Mr. Hale looked down. That if I came back, everything would fall apart. Daniel spoke for the first time. It already did. The room went quiet again, because that was the truth. 25 years of silence had only delayed the damage. It hadn't prevented it. Mr. Hale looked at Daniel. I gave you a life most people could only dream of, he said. Daniel's voice was calm. And you took his, he replied. Mr. Hale closed his eyes, because now there was no one left to agree with him, no one left to justify what he had done. Adrian stepped closer. For 25 years, he said, I thought I was unwanted. The words hit harder than anything before. I thought my parents left me, he continued. My chest tightened. And all this time, he paused. You were alive. Mr. Hale's voice broke. I thought I was giving you a better future, he said again. But this time, it sounded weaker, because even he no longer believed it. Adrian shook his head. You didn't give me a future, he said. You took my past. The room fell silent, because there was nothing left to argue, nothing left to defend, only the truth and the consequences that came with it. Adrian stepped back, not angry, not shouting, but something else, resolved. I don't know what you thought this would become, he said, but this, he looked around the room, this is what you created. Mr. Hale didn't respond, because now he was finally seeing it too. Right part 20. The life we chose next, no one spoke for a long time. There was nothing left to argue, nothing left to explain. The truth had already done its work. Adrian stood there quietly, looking at Mr. Hale, not with anger anymore, not even with hatred, but with something far heavier, understanding. I can't change what you did, Adrian said finally. Mr. Hale didn't move. And I can't pretend it didn't happen, Adrian continued. His voice was calm, steady. But I can decide what happens next. Those words changed something in the room, because for the first time, this wasn't about the past. It was about choice. Adrian looked at me, then at Daniel. I don't belong to either of your lives the way they were, he said. My chest tightened. But that doesn't mean I don't belong anywhere. I nodded slowly, because he was right. This wasn't about replacing one life with another. It was about building something new. Daniel stepped forward. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, he said. Adrian looked at him. But I don't want to lose this either, Daniel added. The honesty in his voice was real. Because despite everything, the bond we had built as a family hadn't disappeared. It had just changed. Adrian took a breath. We don't have to decide everything today, he said. Relief moved through me quietly, because healing doesn't happen in a moment. It happens over time. I just needed to know the truth, Adrian continued. And now he did. I stepped closer to him. Not too close, not forcing anything, just enough to let him know I was there. I don't expect anything from you, I said gently. He looked at me. But if you ever want to know me, I paused. I'm here. Adrian's expression softened slightly. I think, he said slowly, I'd like that. Those words meant more than anything else that night because they weren't forced, they were chosen. Daniel let out a quiet breath beside us, and for the first time, there was something in the room that hadn't been there before. Not confusion, not pain, but possibility. We left Mr. Hale's house shortly after. No more words were needed, because his role in our lives was over. The rest was ours to decide. As we stepped outside, the night air felt different, lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because everything was finally real. And sometimes that's where healing begins. And even today, when I look at both of them, I don't see a mistake anymore. I see the life we chose to rebuild. Thank you for being here and listening. If this story touched you, please tap the like button. It helps more than you know. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like this. And if you feel comfortable, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from or sharing a small part of your own story.